No, so we've got a couple of other points to get through here. We've got a couple of listener questions, and then we've got some news. So first question from Rabula on Twitter. He says, what are your guys' thoughts regarding the draft system being proposed in Super Rugby Pacific?
Look, I think it depends what your issue is. Maybe it does bring some interest outside the games. It gets you to know and maybe make larger stars of players coming in, something that I think American footy does very, very well. You know who these players are long before they turn up, long before they get a run. But I think the bigger issue is, we're going to get Australian players spread out over more teams. So we're hurting our cohesion. We're going to bring in more Kiwi players because they're probably going to be higher up the list more than likely each year. And we're going to end up with fewer and fewer Aussies playing in Super Rugby.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think across the competition, it makes absolutely no sense. You ruin cohesion. Kiwis players are clearly going to be picked above the Aussie guys, and it's going to hurt the Aussies in the long run very, very clearly. And I think it'll probably hurt the Kiwis as well. They'll have plenty of depth. But let's just turn it into the Bunnings NPC then, hey? Look, I think what could work in my eyes maybe is an Australia draft and a Kiwi draft, and then that way you keep them in the nations. I think the separate point that has been brought up is obviously about eligibility. I've got no problem with an Australian player being eligible if they're playing in a New Zealand team or vice versa, but I just think that there's got to be some cap to it as well. Maybe you can have a couple, 2 or 3 players from the other nation just to add a little bit of depth and hopefully make the competition a little bit more even across the board.
We've already got a cap, mate. You've got the international cap where you only 2 or 3 players. So all it means is...
No, but I'm saying it doesn't count towards that. I'm saying because and then the Kiwis aren't going to pick him either. So why would any top-class Kiwi come across right now?
Well, no, I'm saying I agree with changing the eligibility that you can be picked as an Australian player if you're playing in New Zealand and vice versa. But what I'm saying is we already have a cap of international players. We don't need to add another 2 or 3 international players allowed in each team. We've already got it. So instead of picking an English bloke, pick a Kiwi and he can still play for New Zealand.
Yeah, fair. And to be honest, I don't think we really fill the cap for most sides anyway.
No. Forced to all.
So I guess basically we're both not in favour of it, but maybe do you like the Australia-wide one?
Look, I definitely could see something like that working, and they could even play it off and really still build the players and the names. You could even do a competition wide, like both countries doing the same. What's it called? Where you sprint stats, your lifting stats, your jumping stats, all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Your combine. You could do a combine across the comp, but you can only pick within your nation. That could just build interest from both, because then if that's streamed, you're getting to see all the talent coming through. And each year you'll have a couple big names. We could have had Yorgo coming through, things like that, which would definitely add some interest.
And I think just promote the new Hot Chip podcast, which is already out there, to promote the young guys as well, right?
And look, honestly, the draft system, love it. Sounds like draft rugby, so that's something I can get behind. We had another question. This is from Rugby Fixation, but also, friend of the pod, clearly, but also seconded by a guy that we're seeing a lot more of, the conductor on Twitter. He's getting behind our stuff and he's got some good views and other stuff he puts out. They said, why do the Highlanders, now with a healthier squad, still not have Nareki starting or Marino Mikaele Tu'u even in the 23? Is this enough grounds to consider the Highlanders are throwing the match?
I did have a think about this one. I think they're not trying to throw the match. I think they're just insane. But I can break it down for a couple of reasons. So first of all, they're playing the Chiefs this week at home, but it's still the Chiefs. But then they play the Brumbies the week after. Then they host the Rebels and Reds, who are 2 possible wins, and they finish with the Blues in Auckland as well. So they got 3 out of 5 very, very hard games. So I don't think resting 2 weeks out from playing the Rebels makes any sense. So first of all, I don't think they're throwing the game. Secondly, if we go to Jonah Nareki, we know he's coming back from a stress fracture in his foot. So I dare say they were originally going to put him through club rugby. They rushed him over to play the Waratahs after they got spanked by the Force. So I dare say they're trying to manage his minutes in the same way they would have, a bit more retrospectively, through club rugby had they not rushed him over a week earlier than originally planned. So I think that explains that one. And the Marino Mikaele Tu'u question, I can say this is just lunacy. manifest as a Marino Michele Tu'u holder that's held him in my draft team since round one. He's an absolute weapon. I get it. Hugh Renton, Sean Withy have been absolutely excellent. And Sean Withy's about triple the size I thought he was when I saw him in real life against the Tars. But Michele Tu'u was one of the form loose forwards in the comp 2 years ago. That makes absolutely no sense to me. He just hasn't had the opportunity to play.
And I'll add my view. Nareki is on my fantasy side. Get the man on and get him bulk minutes. He played 25 minutes last week. Surely you can give him like 50 minutes this week. Double it up. Should have got him, get him starting. At least bring him on at the start of second half. Get this guy more minutes. Don't give him 25 minutes. That's not building anything. Michele Tu'u, geez, they're just, that back row is in some form. Renton has been immense, and Withy has looked really, really good as well. Frizzell is there, and at times recently, Frizzell's probably looked the weakest of the three of those guys we've just mentioned. That's concerning that they got Michele Tu'u and Frizzell as their two lower performing back rowers out of that lot. So, yeah, they've got some back row depth. It's pretty crazy.
Absolutely. So thanks for the question, guys. We will get, I think we've got a few more in the preview as well, but let's go the top couple of stories of the week, Nels, before we catch up with the preview of this week. First of all, Andy Marinos quits as the CEO, seemingly out of absolutely nowhere. And there's been some, I feel like there's some subtle mudslinging from all the reporters on the internet since then as well.
Yeah, interesting. We were chatting to him only on Friday night, and there definitely didn't get any vibe that anything was up. He was walking around chatting to people and didn't seem like he was worried about anything. But yeah, no, the big talk about it is that maybe he didn't like the look, or he was the only no vote on the Rugby Australia board for bringing in Sua'ali'i, however you want to pronounce it, and wasn't keen on the other NRL players coming across. He's done a lot of good for that they're trying to get across. You look confused. There's a long list that Rugby Australia's put out. He seems disinterested in any of them. He didn't want to bring Eddie back until 2024. That was his goal as well after the World Cup.
I think definitely some different viewpoints to the rest of the board. So maybe it was just, I guess, differences of opinion, and he's probably thinking, well, if I keep going the other way and I'm not being voted with, maybe I'm not belonging here. But I think he's a good foil. He's so different to Hamish McLennan, and I think it's good to have a board with different opinions in the room rather than an echo chamber. So I'm disappointed personally. I was a bit skeptical coming from Sanzar, where we never really saw anything of him at all. I thought he'd done quite a good job since he's been put up as CEO. So I'm a bit disappointed, and he's a good guy too.
Yeah, look, he loves his rugby. He's around talking to fans. He's done well. He's brought us, from a significant deficit into making a profit, last year. He's been looking into, a bit more centralisation. He's been looking into, the new deal with Super Rugby moving forward, maybe PE, private equity coming in. He's done a lot of good things, but yeah, it just seems like he's taken us to the phase where he's created a bit more stability and brought us back into a profit. And now, with this 4 or 5 year period, technically 7-year period up when we're talking about the Women's World Cup as well, he's maybe not the man to try to push to grow the game in different ways. He wasn't super interested with, the Sunwolves and things at times. He didn't really want to expand into Japan as well. And when recent talks were there, and as well with, by all reports as well, similar with rugby championships growing and bringing in Fiji and Japan and things. So I think he didn't want to do things too different. And
I think he's conservative. And McLennan is very aggressively proactive.
We need something different into this next 4 or 5 years to get as many eyeballs on the game. And Sua'ali'i has been a massive part of that so far.
Yeah, and that's a year before he even comes across. Anyway, that's all good points. Nels, the other one?
So we now have reports that Nick White is likely heading west. Larkham wants to keep him in Brumby land down in ACT. Surely White wants to go to some greener, warmer pastures near the coast. But yeah, he's rumoured to be linked even potentially with James O'Connor, who is another name thrown out as a guy that could be signing with the Force. And this is off the back of the signings we had, a fortnight ago of Tizano and Naisarani. They're really coming through in the last few weeks of trying to bring these guys across, or at least link them and prevent them from going offshore.
I wish I heard this stuff a month ago, because I never would have had my blow up. Like, there's so many fantastic signings. What do you mean?
This is why they're doing those signings.
Oh, it's because of us.
They listen to it.
Amazing, even better then. Look, no, it's fantastic news. I love it. I know there was an article a couple of weeks ago, Nick White saying he really wanted to stay in Australia, but Rugby Australia given him a significantly reduced contract. They were kind of suggesting to him that he was at the end of his career. The guy's 30 or 32 or something. Like, he's still really quite young, and he wants to stay around for the next 5 years. So I think he's one of the world's best halfbacks. I think he's by far and away our best halfback. And I think it's lunacy that they're not offering him a bigger contract than what they are. The only downside, I think, for the Force here, and there are so many positives about these signings, but James O'Connor's another one. Both these guys are very experienced players that are used to being paid a pretty large sum of money, that are clearly not going to be getting any sort of decent Rugby Australia top-up contract, which means the Western Force are again going to be using a hell of a lot of their salary cap to try and pay for them, and they're not going to get the Wallaby top-ups that they should be getting to support them, to hold them in the club. So that's my big worry. I think I'm starting to wonder how the Force are going to be able to do this under the cap, because they're not going to get the help they should really be from Rugby Australia.
I feel like they'll get some leniency for keeping players here, and the fact that they're having their rebuild after everything. I know we've seen leniency in the past for the Force and the Rebels when they came on board, especially the Rebels. I know they had a lot of leniency when they created the club, but it's a tricky one. Nick White in a month will be 33, and he's talking about wanting to be here for the World Cup, the next World Cup. You're talking 2027, so he'll be 37 years old. But he's such a good player. The thing is, if he wants to stay in Australia, he's got the choice of taking a significant pay cut, or maybe giving up that hope to stay and finishing in greener pastures in terms of more money. Like, that's the choices you get in Australia and New Zealand. You can't stick around on big money when we're trying to hold talent moving forward. I want him to stay, but the thing is, we just don't have the cash to have him signed, Gordon signed, Tate signed. And
personally, I think that's the exact. I think you're exactly right. In that case, I just think Tate or Jake should go overseas for 2 years and come back a better, more complete player when Nick White is getting a bit further into his contract, Make him sign for 2025 back into Super Rugby, the guy, whoever goes overseas. So then all three are signed over the Lions period, you know what I mean? And hopefully they come back a better player if you can't keep them all. But Nick White's our best 9. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I think that this is one of the tricky things we're going to see moving forward as well. If we're opening up eligibility overseas, they're going, we can lose him and we can pick him from overseas. That's one of the thoughts. He's played enough with these guys. We can lose him. We don't have to pay his salary. Yeah. And we can bring him back, and he's got that experience. But it's not. We haven't got any
clarity around that, though, do we, about the eligibility overseas?
No, Eddie's talked about looking into it and maybe making changes to see if something else is needed to make it be, beneficial for Rugby Australia. As in, do they pick more players, not less, get rid of the ability to pick any of the players?
Yeah, it's far from a done deal, though. Anyway, great news for the Force. I'm very excited to see where they head with it, and we'll touch on the other guys that you named in the preview as well.